Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing fine. I want to catch you up on the news because I know you catch up on the news too. And
I've been sleeping.
We're going to talk about what happened, I think, just yesterday. And you should feel much safer because our president is protecting us. He has pointed out the enemies and he has declared that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard is a terrorist group. And somebody will say, so what? Yeah, so what? They've probably been involved in some unconstitutional things, and people say they're all over the world killing people, and, you know, they're part of the al-Qaeda. All the rumors that have been around, at least they don't have a good reputation in the United States. But there's another side to the story, and the whole thing is this something unusual? Do they just periodically pick some country or a special military group in a country and designate them as a terrorist group? No, not very often. Matter of fact, probably never before this. So this is a big deal. And the question is why are we doing this? I mean, what is the motivation for this? What can be accomplished? Are we going to be safer and more secure? And of course, if you look at our relationship with Iran over the last 2 years, things have changed significantly. And there are some people proposing the idea that the neocons actually wouldn't mind having a war. You know, this whole thing about the way the war started in Iraq and Afghanistan, it was always couched in terms of protecting us and taking care of our national security and punishing bad people. And then, now everybody say, yeah, we were lied into that war. So that happens. So here we have lots of things going on right now directed toward not better relationships with Iran, but to actually making it much worse, and I think more dangerous.
Yeah, and you mentioned it's a very rare occurrence. In fact, it's only happened once before. The U.S. designated a foreign country's military as a terrorist organization, and that was back in World War II against the SS. You know, and whatever you think about the Iran's Revolutionary Guard, it's no Himmler. You know, so it is a rare thing, and there's a reason for it. It's not just because we're not tough enough.
Right.
It's because when you do that, when you designate a foreign military, the members of that foreign military, the leaders of that foreign military association as terrorists, well, they may do the same to you, which is what they did yesterday. They designated CENTCOM, the U.S. Central Command, as a terrorist organization. Say, okay, everyone's just calling names, flinging mud. But it's more than that because it has more implications. Here's one example. Here's one implication. In Iraq, Iran's Revolutionary Guard is very often present. The leadership is often visiting because they're allied, of course, thanks to our invasion. There's going to be an awkward situation where the U.S. still occupies Iraq essentially with its military. You may have a designated terrorist here meeting with the government of Iraq that we bought and we paid for. So it's a very dangerous situation, and it opens our military up. We can talk about it later to being killed as well.
And I think the neocons take the position that what are we going to do about it? You know, we're king of the hill, and they can't do a thing to us. But I don't think the Iranians are going to roll over. And I think that you can keep poking at them long enough that they're going to do something. And they made an announcement, too, which is probably less significant, but significant nevertheless. And that is they declared that the U.S. military is a terrorist organization. And I said, well, you know, there's some people in this country, as well as around the world, have thought for a long time that our CIA acts like a terrorist organization because nobody even knows what they're doing. That's all done in secret. And they get involved, believe it or not, in elections and coups and all these kind of things.
No.
So this is sort of just making that point that, yes, we can designate this. The Iranians are coming back with something, but I don't think this is the end of it. I think this is much more significant, and we're going to be dealing with this problem for a while.
You know, when Trump started his administration, he brought in his generals. You were concerned, we were concerned, all these generals everywhere. What's going on? We were concerned. In retrospect, now that the neocons have replaced the generals look a lot better in hindsight. But this is what happened. You know, the al-Quds forces, which is part of the Revolutionary Guard, was declared terrorist back in 2007 under George W. Bush. The DOD has always opposed this move. The Pentagon doesn't like this at all. And here's what one of the Joint Chiefs said in 2007, arguing against designating him as terrorists. The United States has always carefully avoided declaring military officers engaged in activities sanctioned by their governments as terrorists to avoid the same being done to us, which is exactly what's happened. They understand what a can of worms this opens up and how really vulnerable it leaves our troops.
Yes, and the economics of this can't be ignored either, because we have sanctions and we've been punishing Iran and poking at them for a long time, almost like deliberately trying to start up a war. But they're reacting to this. I think it's fascinating, although this is long term, is the preparation that they have with some allies in the region to do a railroad and a road, from the Persian Gulf all the way to Syria to the Mediterranean, so they don't have to depend on the conventional routes that we dominate. So this is something that they could help the economy as well, because they have not rolled over completely either. So they're getting some of their oil out. They actually have a little bit of cash coming in, but it's so much worse than it had been for them, and it's just a punishment that seems so unnecessary, because it goes against everything we believe in, because there's a lot of bad people around. Everybody has their shortcomings. We do, they do. But we always believe that, getting along with them and trading with them and, a little bit of sporting events. And I saw today, I don't know if you saw it.
I was thinking of you, I bet.
Cuba.
There
were 34 Cuban players were about ready to come over here, and Trump says, no way, you can't come.
I thought of you when I saw that.
Maybe I have too much confidence about war, but this is not a part of our program, But when we played baseball in the Congress, the Democrats and Republicans, we were just kids playing baseball.
Yeah.
And all I knew is things got along better. So anyway, we're going in the wrong direction here, and we're antagonizing them. But we've had a couple senators speak out, and they weren't our friends. The 1-2 comments I saw came from Cruz and Cotton, and they're all for this declaration. So I guess they fall into the category of neocons. But when Cruz was elected, that certainly wasn't the image that he portrayed. Yeah. So that to me is a bit of a disappointment. Sure. I think we knew where Cotton was coming from, and there's other neocons floating around in that Congress.
And there's a perception that these things are cost-free. We don't have a war on our soil, and so they're ever more aggressive. It's all cost-free. The thing to look at, which is kind of interesting, what is driving Trump to do this? He's pulled out of the Iran deal. He's done a number of other things to wrong-foot Iran. What's behind it? Well, one of the things I think, and I wrote about this to an update that we send out to the Ron Paul Institute subscribers. He spent the weekend with Sheldon Adelson, the biggest donor. He's given $100 million in the last election cycle to Republicans. He's hanging out with Sheldon Adelson over the weekend, and here he pops out on Monday and makes this designation. Okay, that's one thing. And then what happens right after he does it? Netanyahu gives out a tweet. And here's what Netanyahu tweeted today on designating the guards as terrorists. Quote, "Thank you, my dear friend Donald Trump, for answering another one of my requests."
The key word there is another. Because it's been steady. The movement of the Capitol, which even individuals much more aggressive than Trump, but they thought it unwise, to be poking around and changing the Capitol, and it might provoke trouble. Right now, it's the Golan Heights. Out of the clear blue, I don't like the imperial president. Oh, okay, they want Golan Heights. We declare Golan Heights part of Israel, and we will protect them. We're going to always protect Israel, so we're going to protect them. Golan Heights is part of Israel. Same way with the West Bank and the settlements. Yeah. I mean, there's no way we're going to ever take a position on that. Not that I think we have to take a position, but we can say we don't need to support a position that that doesn't fit our philosophy of just aggressively having settlements, which adds a greater burden on us. And of course, the other thing that has pushed us in the wrong direction has been this discontinuing the nuclear the nuclear treaty, the agreement, which was important. And the Europeans, matter of fact, the Europeans are splitting away from us on that issue. So all these things, but once again, maybe that's what Netanyahu had in mind. And another time, I'd like to thank you for the policy, but I just think that's way out of control, because I don't think it's being done in our self-interest. I don't think the Iraqis weren't going to attack us, the Afghanis weren't going to attack us, the Syrians weren't going to attack us, the Libyans weren't going to attack us, and right now there's no evidence that the Iranians are going to attack them, but they don't even have a history of doing this. Yeah, they have allies and they send help and this sort of thing, and it's our not only misjudgments, but sort of stupidity, because we didn't really go into Iraq saying, this is a good idea. What we could do is really help out the Iranians. It's almost like there was a spy in there, because that ended up helping the Iranians, and now they're closer buddies with the government in Iraq than we are. So the philosophy is just not. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But not only is it's not just neutral, it's usually negative. It doesn't accomplish what they want. It usually causes more harm, and they have to keep reacting, and we have to keep spending money and making more and more enemies. And that's what I don't like.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with being friendly to the government of Israel, to Israeli people, but there's a better way of doing it than the way they're doing it. But the other thing that's an issue here, and I think it's got to be in the forefront of everyone's mind, particularly Netanyahu, is that the Israelis are going to the polls. This is blatant election manipulation. Thank you, U.S., for granting me another wish. It's basically him telling the Israeli people, hey, Trump is going to deliver for me. You better elect me. Don't elect the other guy. This is blatant influence.
Well, let me think about that for a minute. What is our position on interfering in elections? I thought we didn't like that. Yeah. We didn't like it when those Russians came and delivered the election to Trump. It's so hypocritical.
Yeah.
And I bet there wouldn't be a difficult time to prove that our CIA and our governments have been more involved in coups and manipulation, interference in election than any country ever in the history of the world. And yet it's good policy as far as they're concerned. Well, we have to have good guys in there. That's the whole argument. And they're not even bashful about how we decided who should be president of Venezuela. And then if you decide, well, we shouldn't do anything, we shouldn't support either side. Oh, that means you're part of the Russian conspiracy, to promote communism in Venezuela because you support Maduro.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it goes on and on.
We know the rationale behind these claims about Iran, and really, it's unfortunate that they continue to be repeated, because it reminds us of Iraq. Every rationale for every time they ratcheted up the pressure was all lies, was based on lies, and literally the same people who did it then are doing it now. But one of the claims is that Trump in 2017 made a speech where he accused Iran of protecting al-Qaeda. That's not the case. In fact, Iran has been fighting al-Qaeda in Syria for a number of years now. What Iran did do is, when the U.S. invaded Afghanistan, a group of al-Qaeda members and their families fled to Iran, where they're currently being held under house arrest. And the reason, for however you think about it, is they're basically being held as hostages, warning al-Qaeda that if you cross the border and attack Iran, these leaders are going to be killed. So that's one thing. The claims they had something to do with the Kenya bombing, that's all been disproven. They had nothing to do with 9/11, even though Trump made that suggestion in a 2017 speech. The other thing that they say is Iran-supported groups have killed Americans in Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, that may be partly true, but what were the American troops doing in Iraq and Afghanistan? They were invading a country based on lies. It's unfortunate when Americans get killed, for sure, but they had no business being there, so blame the American leaders, really, not the Iranian leaders.
That's right, and one thing that is developing from this is authority, proper authority. In spite of all the illegalities and unconstitutionalities, they still, on the surface, the authority has to be legitimate. And I think about, the old Soviet system and the Nazi system, the really ruthless dictators that they would torture you until you're near dead, then you confess, you sign a paper, you confess, and then they kill you. But it was almost obsessed that we had to see on paper that they confessed to have done what they did, so that justified this, even though it was totally artificial. And that reminds me of what they're doing now is we have used that authority to use military force, which was set up for going after al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, which was a lie, and all this sort of thing. So, but they've used that, and they've used it how many more times? 6, 8, 10 times. They use it anytime they want. Oh, there might be al-Qaeda there. And now, with this whole thing of declaring that the Revolutionary Guard is a terrorist nation, morally now we're justified no matter where they are, because we know they have allies around here. So we're just following up. We have the authority, and if you talk about the misuse and abuse of authority, well, it's common practice, but it is that, and this might be part of it, that the people who are really looking for the war might look for a justification like this, but other times I think it's just flat out blundering. That they're engaged in, thinking that we'll cause harm and we'll cause people to do anything. We'll put on sanctions, and they'll throw out their dictators. And no matter how many times it fails, they kept doing this. But still, this whole, I'm absolutely wrong on that they don't use the authority to use military force as a reason, to go in and start this war. Of course, they'll figure out some way. That's why, although China and Russia has an involvement in Venezuela, it's economic.
Yeah.
It's economic. But they will use that and say, oh, well, they're the terrorists in there, and now the Iranians in there. Oh, they're terrorists. So now we have to go in there, and some people don't even care if it's justified, because we want our guy in. We want our CIA guy in there. So a big contest there, Maduro against the CIA, and how are you going to pick? Why don't we pick a pro-American position? Just come home.
Yeah. Well, Colonel Pat Lang, who we've known, who spoke at your Thursday lunches in the past, he made that exact point, that this designation, really because of the attempts, probably successful in terms of propaganda, to make a connection between al-Qaeda and Iran, this may have the effect of providing legal cover for the U.S. to start attacking, maybe not overtly, maybe not carpet bombing a Revolutionary Guard, but maybe in the secret wars, maybe in the covert wars. If you see one, kill it, behind the scenes. So there's a lot more to it. It's not a cost-free issue. But I would just close by reminding our viewers yet once again, Houston Conference, May 18th, on winning the war on drugs. Great speakers. It's going to be a great group. RonPaulInstitute.org/conference. Check it out and get your tickets. Get your early bird tickets while you still can. And remember, the month of April, we're doing our spring fundraising to help the show, to help the Ron Paul Institute. This is a terrific little book from Dr. Paul on the individual versus collective, the collective, something that we are really focused on. It's really in the front of the headlines. For your donation of $50, we will send you this. For your donation of $100 or more, Dr. Paul will sign it. You can only get it here. So thank you so much for your support.
Well, there's no doubt what's going on right now is not a positive, but then again, it doesn't mean they're going to have automatic success because they're not correct on the policy making. It would be nice that if we could play baseball with Iran, but I don't think they play baseball. So we could play soccer, but that's not likely to happen. I don't think that's just a daydream. But what about trade? Well, we were trading there, with the Iranians, and we had that nuclear pact and an agreement. They've never broken it. The UN has given a clean slate, and we were at one time trading a lot more with the Russians. All we do is each day, let's put on more sanctions. So they've drifted away from sports and they've drifted away from trade, except it's backfiring on them to a degree. Now that we've walked away from the nuclear pact with the Iranians, guess what? The Europeans don't like that. They like trading with Iran. And that is good. So trade is more natural and it's peaceful. So we won't give up yet, but we need to keep pointing this out and why they do these things and what is the purpose. But it is not for promotion of peace and prosperity. The real dilemma on trying to figure this out and the motivations behind our policies is they're just all over the place. I mean, we've reversed our trends, which were positive with Iran and Russia. And at the same time, we're at the beginning of this administration, it looked like, good night, we might end up dropping bombs on North Korea. But all of a sudden, we're talking peace and trade and this sort of thing. So it can be reversed. We may never understand how you reverse it or what happens, why they change their mind, and it's various reasons for that. So let's hope some good reasons come along for us to change our attitude about not provoking war. And it makes no sense. And that cannot ever be used against somebody, because I take this position. You can't turn around and say, oh, the Iranian people aren't perfect. They violate civil liberties too. And if you say, oh, if Russia, they're not good people. They have all kinds of trouble and you're supporting communism. That should be avoided, because if you're going to do that, yes, there should be some discretion. We should look at policies and we should put some blame when it involves our country. There we have responsibility. And with me, it was when I was in Congress, I had a responsibility to represent, the people. And therefore, we have something to say about our policy. But why was it so easy then to not to stay out of these battles overseas? Because I thought it was in our best interest. I didn't believe we had the constitutional authority. I didn't think we had the moral authority to do it. And it means that it's not a perfect world. But if you want to work toward a more perfect world, you've got to promote peace and prosperity, and that is no aggravation and trade with people. That is the way to move to more peace and greater prosperity. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.